snow never stopped falling, and for her it felt like the sky itself wanted her to die. The alien woman walked through ruined towns, through broken steel, through places where the wind cut like knives. For 10 long years, she had no warm bed. She slept on stone floors, on rusted metal, sometimes inside hollowed tree trunks. Her body had grown used to pain, but her spirit had become weaker every year. Each night she prayed for just one thing. Not food, not wealth, not even freedom, only warmth. A bed with blankets, a place where her bones didn't shake, a place where her heart could rest without fear. Her people had thrown her away. She once belonged to them, but they called her weak, cursed, and unfit. They told her she had no right to stay in their homes. She had refused to follow an order long ago, an order that would have brought suffering to others. And for that, her clan marked her as a traitor. They drove her out in winter. Since then, the snow had been her only companion. 10 winters passed, each one colder than the last, each one harder to survive. Sometimes she asked herself why she still lived, why she kept walking when the ice burned her skin and hunger made her dizzy. But something deep inside whispered, "Keep moving, keep breathing, maybe one day there will be a fire again." Her nights were the worst. She remembered lying inside the skeleton of an old ship, the walls cracked and sharp, the wind howling through broken glass. She would curl herself tight, holding her arms to her chest, shaking until her teeth ached. Sleep never came easy. When it did, it brought nightmares, faces of the ones who hated her, the voices of hunters who once chased her, the memory of her mother turning her back. She woke each time with tears frozen on her cheeks. She told herself not to cry, because tears only wasted strength, but loneliness pressed on her heart like ice. The silence of the world was heavier than chains. Food was not simple either. She ate roots buried deep under the snow, sometimes rats, sometimes things she could not even name. Once she fought a scavenger beast over a piece of frozen meat. Her hands still carried the scars from that night, 3 long claw marks across her wrist. When she looked at them, she reminded herself, she survived, and that meant she was still alive for a reason. But what reason? She never knew. She only walked forward, step after step, year after year. There were days when she wanted to give up. Days when she dropped to her knees in the snow, her body shaking too much to continue. Once, she even laid down and closed her eyes, thinking maybe the cold would finally take her. But then, she remembered the stars. She remembered lying as a child under warm blankets, looking through a roof window at the night sky. Her father once told her, "Stars are fire in the dark. As long as you see them, you are not alone." That memory forced her to rise again. It was the only warmth she had left inside. She wandered far, beyond the lands of her people. She crossed dead rivers and broken bridges. The world felt endless, and yet every place looked the same. White snow, dead trees, silence. But one evening, something different happened. As she walked through a ruined forest, her body weak and her legs barely carrying her, she smelled something strange. It was smoke, warm smoke, the smell of fire. She stopped, her heart racing. She had not smelled fire for years, not since she was cast out. Her breath came fast, and for the first time in so long, her chest felt alive. She followed the scent, moving faster, stumbling but refusing to stop. Each step felt like hope. She came to a clearing and froze. There, hidden between old trees, she saw a glow. It was a campfire. A real fire, bright and alive, crackling against the dark night. And beside it sat a human. His figure was strong, shoulders broad under a coat, his face sharp but calm. He was eating something cooked on the fire, steam rising into the cold air. She had heard of humans before, strange creatures who were stubborn and dangerous, but also warm, always building fires even in the worst places. Her heart pounded. She wanted to run to him, to throw herself at the fire, to feel heat against her skin. But fear held her back. Would he kill her? Would he chase her away like everyone else? Her legs shook as she stepped closer. The snow crunched under her feet, and the human turned, his hand reaching for his weapon. Their eyes met. His eyes were cold like steel, yet not cruel. He watched her carefully, as if deciding whether she was a threat or a beggar. She could not hold his gaze. Her lips trembled, her breath turning into weak clouds of frost. She lowered herself to her knees, her body too weak to stand, and whispered words she never thought she would say. "Please. Just one night in your warm bed." The silence after her words was heavy. The fire crackled between them, glowing like a small sun. She stared at the ground, waiting for anger, for rejection, for him to tell her to crawl back into the snow and die there. But her heart refused to give up. She had walked for 10 years through storms, through pain, through loneliness. For 10 years, she had begged the stars for warmth, and now at last she begged a human. The human soldier sat still, his hand close to the weapon by his side, eyes sharp on the figure kneeling before him. The woman's voice was weak, broken, but there was something in it that made him hesitate. He had met enemies before. He had seen liars. He had fought creatures who begged for mercy only to strike when his guard fell. He knew danger lived behind soft eyes and trembling hands. Yet here, in the glow of his fire, he did not see an enemy. He saw someone on the edge of death, someone who had fought far too long against the cold. Her thin body shook as the night wind pushed against her. Her clothes were torn, her skin pale, and her breath came in uneven gasps. The soldier's first thought was that she might die right there, at his feet. He did not like the idea of blood freezing in the snow outside his camp. But he also knew taking her in could bring risk. She was alien, her kind known for betrayal, for tricks, for using pity as a weapon. He stared longer, waiting for any sign of deception. She did not move, only kept her head bowed low, her shoulders trembling as if she carried more than just the weight of snow. Finally, he spoke. His voice was steady, deep, carrying suspicion. Why here? Why me? There are others of your kind out there. His words were not kind, but neither were they cruel. He wanted truth. She lifted her eyes slightly, and in them he saw exhaustion so deep it almost scared him. She whispered, I have no others. Only you. Please, just one night. The soldier's jaw tightened. He looked at the fire, then back at her. The silence stretched between them, filled only with the sound of wind brushing the trees. He thought of his orders. Trust no one, especially not her kind. But he also thought of his own years in battle, the nights he had been cold and alone when only fire kept him alive. He remembered the feeling of being treated like nothing more than a weapon, not a person. That memory pricked at his chest as he studied her again. At last, he moved his hand away from the weapon and gestured to the cabin behind him. It was a small shelter built from broken wood and steel, barely large enough for one, yet warmer than the open night. Inside, he said, his voice rough. She gasped softly, as if she could not believe it. Slowly, unsteady, she rose to her feet. Every step looked painful, her legs stiff from years of cold. She walked toward the cabin door, her body leaning forward like the weight of the world pressed on her back. He followed her inside. The cabin was simple, one small bed with heavy blankets, a stove glowing faintly, and a table with little more than supplies. It was no palace, but compared to the frozen wasteland outside, it felt like another world. She stopped near the bed, staring at it as though it were a treasure. Her lips parted, but no words came. For a long time, she only stood there, her eyes wet with the shine of tears. The soldier watched closely. He wanted to see if she would drop the act, if this was a mask to hide a trick. But she did not move toward him. She did not search for weapons, nor did she act with the arrogance of a spy. She only touched the blanket with shaking hands, almost afraid it would vanish if she pressed too hard. Finally, she whispered, I had forgotten what warmth looked like. He did not answer. Instead, he set his rifle against the wall and sat at the table, keeping her in his sight. He knew trust was a dangerous thing, and yet something in him softened. He saw no soldier, no traitor, no liar in her. He only saw someone who had wandered too long in the dark. She lowered herself onto the bed slowly, as if the softness would break her bones. Her body relaxed the moment she touched it, a deep sigh escaping her lips. For the first time in years, her muscles loosened, her heart slowed. She curled under the blanket, clutching it like a child would clutch a lifeline. Soon her eyes closed, though her breathing stayed uneven, as if even in sleep she feared the world might tear her away again. The soldier kept his silence, listening to the small sounds of her sleep. She mumbled in her dreams, muttering words he could not understand, sometimes whimpering as though chased by shadows. He frowned. He had seen soldiers dream like that before, men who carried memories too heavy to forget. It was not the sound of lies, but of scars buried deep. Hours passed, the fire outside fading, the stove keeping the room dimly lit. The soldier stayed awake, watching, waiting. He told himself it was caution, that he needed to be ready if she revealed her true self. But part of him knew it was something else. He wanted to be certain she was real, that her desperation was not just another ghost born of war. When dawn broke, light slipped through cracks in the wooden walls. The woman stirred, her eyes opening slowly. For a moment, she looked lost, as if she had forgotten where she was. Then her gaze fell on the blanket wrapped around her, on the warmth that still surrounded her body, and tears filled her eyes. She turned her head toward him, her voice hoarse but full of emotion. "Thank you." The soldier said nothing, only nodded once. But inside, something shifted. He knew he should not keep her. He knew trouble would follow her, that nothing about this was simple. Yet in that moment, he also knew one truth. He could not send her back into the snow. Not after seeing her like this. Not after hearing the way she begged, not for power or riches, but for one night of warmth. And so, the choice was made. Against every order, against every instinct that told him to be cautious, he allowed her to stay. He did not know what the days ahead would bring, but for now, she had a place by his fire. For now, she had the warmth she had begged for, and though he would never say it aloud, a small part of him felt warmer too. The cabin was silent except for the faint crackle of the stove fire. The human soldier sat on the chair, sharpening his knife, his eyes drifting now and then toward the bed. The alien woman lay there, her face soft in sleep, but her body told a different story. Even wrapped under heavy blankets, she moved restlessly, her brow tight, her lips whispering broken words. Sweat gathered on her skin despite the cold air. She flinched as if invisible hands struck her. Her voice cracked as she muttered names, cries that sounded like apologies, pleas, or curses. The soldier set the knife down and leaned forward, studying her more carefully. In the dim light, her scars became visible. Faded lines across her arms, burns near her shoulders, and marks around her wrists, as though she had been bound many times. His jaw clenched. These were not the scars of hunting beasts or accidents in wild snow. These were scars made by hands, by cruelty. He had seen wounds like these before, on prisoners, on deserters punished without mercy. It stirred something bitter inside him, anger mixed with a strange pity he had not felt in years. Suddenly, she gasped, her whole body jerking as if stabbed. Her eyes opened wide, shining with fear, and she sat up in panic. For a moment, she didn't recognize where she was. Her breathing came hard and fast, her gaze darting around the room until it landed on him. Her trembling hands gripped the blanket tightly. "No, don't send me back," she whispered, her voice shaking. "Please, they will kill me." The soldier did not move closer, but his eyes locked on hers. "Who will kill you?" His tone was steady, though inside he wanted to press harder. She closed her eyes, trying to calm her breath, but her hands did not loosen their grip. She shook her head, her voice breaking. "My own people. They want me dead." The words hung heavy in the small cabin. He leaned back slowly, studying her. He had suspected she was hiding something. Now it was clear. She was not just a wanderer lost in the cold. She was running from something, or rather, someone. And if her people were hunting her, it meant danger would follow her footsteps. She pulled the blanket tighter around her, as though it could shield her from the memories pressing on her mind. Her eyes filled with tears, but she fought them back, biting her lip until it bled. Finally, she spoke again, her voice so low he almost missed it. "I disobeyed them. I refused to do what they ordered. They said I was weak, that I shamed the clan. They marked me, and from that day, I was no longer theirs. I should have died years ago, but somehow, I kept living. Every season, I thought it would be my last, but death never came. Only more cold." Her words cracked near the end, and she buried her face in her hands. Her body shook with silent sobs, though she tried to muffle the sound. The soldier watched, his hands tightening into fists. He had fought against her kind before, seen their pride, their harsh rules, their cruelty to anyone they called unworthy. It was no surprise they had treated her like this. Yet, hearing it from her lips was different. It was not a story told on the battlefield. It was a wound, still open, sitting across from him in the small warmth of his cabin. He stood and walked to the stove, tossing in a few more pieces of wood. The fire crackled, casting light across the room. For a moment, he said nothing, only listening to her quiet sobs. Then, in his rough voice, he finally asked, "Why come here? Why risk crossing into human land?" She looked up at him, her eyes red but steady. because I had nowhere else left to go. My people hunt me. Strangers chase me. Beasts wait in the snow. I thought maybe a human would see me as more than prey. Her lips trembled, and she whispered again, almost too soft to hear. I only wanted warmth. Just once. Her honesty struck him harder than any weapon. He turned away, staring at the flames. He should not trust her. She was still alien, still a danger, still a secret wrapped in too much risk. Yet something about her words dug into him. He remembered his own commanders, the orders he had refused, the punishment he had faced for disobedience. He remembered the long nights when his own people turned their backs, when only firelight kept him sane. For the first time, he felt a strange connection to her pain. She lowered her head again, whispering brokenly, "If you send me back out, I won't last another night. If they find me, they'll do worse. Please." Her voice cracked, and she clutched the blanket like a shield. The soldier finally turned to face her fully. His eyes were hard, but there was something else in them now. Understanding. He walked slowly toward her, each step heavy on the wooden floor. She tensed, her body stiff as though she expected him to strike. But he only crouched beside the bed, meeting her eyes. "No one's taking you tonight," he said firmly. Her breath caught. She stared at him, unable to speak, as if she feared her ears had lied. But his gaze did not waver. His words carried no softness, no promises of forever, but they held weight. For the first time in years, she felt like someone had chosen not to throw her away. She lowered her head again, tears falling freely now, but her lips curved into the faintest smile. Her body, tense for so long, finally began to relax. She whispered one word, filled with both relief and disbelief. "Thank you." The soldier stood again, moving back to his chair. He picked up his knife, pretending to sharpen it once more. But inside his mind was storming. He knew trouble would come. If her people wanted her dead, they would not stop, and if she stayed with him, he would be dragged into it. Yet when he looked at her again, curled under the blanket with exhaustion pulling her back into sleep, he knew the truth. He had already made his choice. For her, warmth was no longer just a bed. It was the fragile protection of a human's promise. And for him, it was the first time in years he had felt his fire mean something more than survival. The day was quiet, but it was the kind of quiet that carried danger. The human soldier stepped outside the cabin, snow crunching under his boots, and scanned the horizon with sharp eyes. The forest around him looked calm, the trees heavy with white, but something in the air felt wrong. He had lived long enough to trust that feeling. His instincts told him they were no longer alone. By noon, his doubts were confirmed. A small group of scouts returned from their patrol with tense faces. One of them spoke quickly, his voice low but urgent. "We found tracks near the ruins to the north. Not beasts, not raiders. It's them. Her kind." The soldier's jaw tightened. He had expected this, but hearing it out loud made the weight heavier. He dismissed the scouts with orders to stay alert, then returned inside. The alien woman sat near the stove, her hands wrapped around a cup of warm water he had given her. When she looked up at him, she noticed the shift in his face immediately. Her grip on the cup tightened. "They're here, aren't they?" she asked quietly. He did not answer at first, only took off his gloves and set them on the table. His silence was enough. She lowered her eyes, the small spark of warmth she had found the night before flickering like a candle against wind. After a long pause, she whispered, "I knew they would come. They always find me." The soldier leaned against the wall, arms crossed, watching her carefully. "Why are they chasing you? Tell me the truth this time. No half words." His tone was firm, the kind that left no room for lies. She swallowed hard, her eyes glistening with fear, but she did not look away. Her voice trembled as she spoke, each word dragging old wounds back to life. "I was born into a high house. My family held soldiers, servants, everything. They expected me to follow orders, to do what was commanded without question. 10 years ago, they told me to carry out something terrible. They wanted me to stand by while innocents were burned. Children, old ones, anyone who resisted. I refused." She paused, her hands shaking so badly the water nearly spilled. She set the cup down, pressing her palms flat against her knees. "That night, I was dragged before the elders. They called me a traitor. They stripped me of my name, my home, my family. They marked me as one to be hunted until dead." Her voice broke, and she covered her face for a moment, forcing herself to breathe. "Since then, I've been running. hiding. Every time I think I'm far enough, I see their shadows again. The soldier listened without moving, but his eyes grew darker. He had fought against her people before. He knew their pride, their cruelty, the way they saw mercy as weakness. It did not surprise him they would hunt their own for refusing to obey. Still, hearing it from her lips made the truth heavier. She looked at him with desperation. If they catch me, they will not kill me quickly. They will make an example of me. That is why I begged you, not just for warmth, for life. The soldier exhaled slowly, rubbing a hand across his jaw. The fire in the stove crackled louder, filling the silence. He thought of his orders: stay alive, protect his own, trust no outsiders. Taking her in went against every rule drilled into him, but leaving her outside, sending her back to the hunters, felt like something he could never forgive himself for. His thoughts were broken by the sound of distant echoes. The woman flinched, her body going rigid. It was faint, but clear. The howl of alien horns, used by patrols to signal each other. The soldier's grip tightened on the knife at his belt. They were closer than he wanted to admit. The woman wrapped her arms around herself, her eyes wide with terror. You see now, they will not stop until I am in their hands. He crouched in front of her, his face close enough that she could see the firelight reflected in his eyes. Listen to me, he said firmly. If they come here, they won't take you without going through me first. Her lips parted, her breath catching in disbelief. She wanted to believe him, but fear still weighed on her like chains. She whispered, "Why would you do that? Why risk your life for me?" He stared at her for a long moment. His answer came rough and quiet. Because I've seen what your kind calls justice. I won't let them do it again, not while I'm standing. For a moment, her tears spilled freely. She lowered her head, her body trembling, not from cold this time, but from something else. Relief, gratitude, a fragile hope she had not dared to feel in years. The soldier stood, checking his rifle and preparing supplies. His movements were steady, but inside, he knew what this meant. Protecting her would make him a target too. Once her hunters discovered she had found shelter with a human, they would come harder, faster, stronger. He could no longer pretend this was temporary. She watched him, her voice soft but urgent. You don't understand. If you stand with me, they'll mark you too. They'll hunt you until you fall. He glanced at her, his expression hard, yet a faint spark of determination burned in his eyes. Then let them come. The cabin grew quiet again, only the sound of snow shifting outside and the fire's glow filling the room. But both of them knew the silence would not last. The shadow of hunters was already near, and the warmth they shared had now become a shield that others would try to break. The woman pulled the blanket tighter around herself, her heart pounding with fear, but also with something she thought she had lost forever. A sense that maybe, just maybe, she was no longer alone in this fight. The soldier sat by the door, weapon across his knees, listening for every sound beyond the trees. The hunter's shadow had fallen over them both, and neither knew if they would survive what was coming. But in that moment, a bond was born, one of survival, of defiance, of two outcasts daring to face the cold together. Night fell heavy, and the forest outside the cabin grew darker than ink. The wind carried strange whispers, and the soldier's ears caught every sound. His rifle rested against his knee, his eyes fixed on the door. He had fought many battles, but this night felt different. This was not just about survival. It was about her. The alien woman sat on the edge of the bed, her hands twisting the blanket nervously, her eyes wide with fear. She could feel it too. Something was moving out there. The first sign came with the crunch of snow. It was faint, but too steady to be an animal. The soldier's jaw tightened. He raised a hand for silence. She froze, barely daring to breathe. Moments later, shadows moved between the trees, shapes tall and broad with the familiar cold glimmer of alien armor. Her heart sank. They had found her. The soldier leaned closer to her and spoke in a low, calm voice. We move now. If we stay, we're cornered. She looked at him, fear shining in her eyes. Please, don't let them take me. Her voice cracked, breaking into a whisper. I would rather die. He did not waste words. He grabbed his coat and pulled it tightly around her thin body, wrapping it so she would not freeze when they ran. He slung his pack across his back, checked the rifle, and then opened the cabin door just enough to peer out. The fire from their stove made smoke curl from the chimney, and he cursed under his breath. That smoke was a signal. It had drawn the hunters right to them. He took her hand, firm and steady, and guided her into the snow. Her legs wobbled, weak from years of hardship, but he half dragged, half carried her forward. The forest swallowed them quickly, the cold biting at their faces. Behind them, shouts rose, alien voices barking orders, the sound of armored boots breaking the snow. She stumbled, gasping for breath, but he pulled her onward. "Keep moving," he muttered, his voice sharp but not unkind. "If you stop, they win." She nodded, though tears blurred her vision. For 10 years she had run alone, hunted like prey. But tonight was different. Tonight, a human ran with her. The chase grew louder. The aliens were spreading through the forest, their lights flashing faintly, beams sweeping between the trees. The soldier led her off the path, through thick roots and heavy snow, his every step calculated to confuse their pursuers. But the woman knew it would not be enough. "They won't give up," she whispered, clutching his hand tighter. "They will hunt until morning." He stopped briefly, pulling her against a tree for cover. His breath came in steady clouds as he scanned the dark. "Then we keep moving until morning," he replied, eyes hard. The night stretched on in a blur of running and hiding. Once, they ducked behind fallen logs as two armored hunters passed so close she could hear their harsh breaths inside their helmets. Her heart raced wildly, her body trembling, but his hand never left hers. His presence was the only thing keeping her from collapsing. But the aliens were clever. By midnight, their horns echoed again, circling them in. The soldier knew they couldn't keep running blind. They needed cover, something stronger than trees. He thought of an old place he had passed weeks ago, a bunker buried under ice, a forgotten ruin from a war long past. It was miles away, but it was their only chance. "We head east," he said firmly. "There's shelter." She stared at him, her face pale and exhausted. I can't go that far." Her legs shook under her weight. For a moment, despair filled her eyes. The soldier didn't argue. He crouched, motioning to his back. "Get on." She blinked, confused. "What?" he growled. "On my back." "You want to live. Don't waste time." Her throat tightened with emotion. No one had ever carried her. No one had ever chosen to bear her weight. For 10 years, she had been nothing but a burden to those who saw her. And now, this human offered his strength without hesitation. Tears slid down her cheeks as she climbed onto his back, her arms clinging tightly around his neck. He rose with her easily, his boots crunching through snow as he began moving again. Each step was steady, powerful, as though her weight meant nothing to him. Her face pressed against his shoulder, and for the first time in a decade, she felt safe in another's arms. She whispered softly, voice shaking, "Why are you doing this?" His answer came low, almost lost in the wind. "Because you asked for warmth, and I'll see that you get it." Hours passed, their path harsh and endless. He carried her without complaint, even as the storm picked up, snow whipping around them like knives. Behind them, the hunters still searched, their shouts fading and returning with the wind. Every sound made her flinch, but every time, his grip tightened, reminding her he would not let go. Finally, just before dawn, the shape of the bunker rose ahead, half buried in snow and ice, its steel doors broken but still standing strong against the cold. He staggered the last few steps, lowered her gently to her feet, and pushed the door open. The stale air inside greeted them, but it was shelter. It was safety, at least for now. She collapsed onto the floor, her chest heaving, tears spilling freely. She looked up at him, his body covered in frost, his face hard but his eyes burning with quiet fire. He closed the door behind them, blocking out the storm, then crouched beside her. "You're safe," he said simply. His voice carried no warmth, yet it was the strongest promise she had ever heard. She reached for his hand, her fingers trembling, and held it tight. "I asked for one night of warmth," she whispered, "but you gave me more than that." He did not reply, but his grip on her hand was firm, unshakable. Outside, the hunters searched the snow, their horns echoing through the frozen forest. But inside the bunker, for the first time in 10 years, she felt the true meaning of safety. Not because of walls or fire, but because a human had chosen to fight for her. The bunker smelled of rust and old smoke, its walls covered in frost, but it was the only shield between them and the hunters outside. The human soldier moved quickly, checking corners, setting up his rifle near a broken window slit that gave him a view of the forest. His face was calm, but his eyes were sharp, calculating every shadow. The alien woman sat on the floor, her knees pulled close to her chest, trying to steady her breathing. Her body still shook from the chase, but her eyes never left him. He loaded his rifle with steady hands. "They'll come here," he said in a low voice. "They're too close to lose the trail. This place will be where we stand." Her stomach knotted. She had seen her people fight before. They were ruthless, trained killers who never stopped until the target was broken. She knew what it meant for him to stand against them alone. Her lips trembled. "You don't understand. There will be many of them. You can't fight them all." He looked over his shoulder at her, his expression unreadable. "Then I'll fight until I can't. That's enough." The sound of horns echoed again in the distance, carried by the wind. She flinched. The soldier crouched down and adjusted the small stove, letting its glow spread warmth through the bunker. "Stay behind cover," he instructed. "No matter what happens, don't run into the open. They'll use you against me if they can." Her chest tightened. She wanted to argue, to tell him he was throwing his life away for someone who didn't deserve it, but her words caught in her throat. No one had ever chosen to protect her before. She pressed a hand to her chest, feeling her heart race with fear and something deeper, something she couldn't name. Minutes passed, stretching like hours. The air grew heavy with tension. Then it came, the crunch of boots outside, the faint hum of alien weapons. The soldier raised his rifle and took a deep breath, steady and slow. He glanced at her one last time, his voice calm. "Stay down." The first shot rang through the night. A flash of light streaked across the trees as one of the hunters fell. Shouts broke out, alien voices echoing through the forest. They answered back with fire of their own, beams slamming against the bunker walls, making sparks fly. The woman covered her ears, shrinking against the floor, her heart hammering. The soldier didn't flinch. His rifle cracked again and again, each shot precise, each movement controlled. The hunters tried to rush the entrance. He grabbed a grenade from his pack, pulled the pin, and rolled it across the floor toward the open doorway. A blast shook the bunker, the roar of fire and smoke filling the air as two of the hunters were thrown back into the snow. The woman gasped, eyes wide, watching him move with fierce determination. He wasn't just a soldier. He was a wall between her and death. But they kept coming. More shadows rushed through the snow, their voices growing louder, their fire burning hotter. The bunker shook with every hit. The soldier reloaded, sweat mixing with frost on his face. A shot grazed his shoulder, tearing through his coat. He gritted his teeth but kept firing, refusing to back down. The woman cried out, crawling closer despite his warning. "You're hurt!" "Stay back!" He barked, his voice sharp, but his eyes never leaving the doorway. Another shot tore into his side, and he stumbled, blood spreading across his coat. The woman's scream echoed in the small space. She rushed to him, pressing her hands to the wound, but he pushed her away. "I said stay back!" His voice broke for a second, softer now. "Don't waste your life on me." Her tears streamed down her face, but she refused to move. "No, if you fall, then I fall too." She pressed her body against his, shielding him with her frame as beams of light tore through the air. For the first time in years, she wasn't running. She wasn't hiding. She was standing. For him. The hunters outside shouted in anger, their fire growing desperate. The soldier, half leaning on her, raised his rifle once more. With her holding him steady, he fired again and again, each shot cutting down the enemies who dared to come closer. Their combined defiance filled the bunker with something stronger than fear, hope. Minutes dragged into eternity, but finally, the shouts faded. The surviving hunters pulled back, their horns sounding retreat. The silence afterward was deafening. The soldier lowered his rifle, his arms trembling, his breaths heavy and broken. Blood stained the floor beneath him, and his vision blurred. He would have collapsed if not for her arms holding him upright. She pressed her forehead to his chest, sobbing uncontrollably. "Don't leave me," she begged. "Please, don't die. Not after you gave me this." He tried to speak, but his voice was weak. Still, he managed a faint smile through the pain. "I'm not dead yet. You'll have to keep me alive." Her tears fell on his wounds as she worked desperately, tearing strips of her clothing to bind them. Her hands shook, her body weak, but her will was stronger than ever. She refused to let him go. For 10 years, she had survived alone, unwanted, hunted. But in this moment, she realized something. Warmth was no longer just a bed, no longer just fire against the cold. Warmth was him, bleeding in her arms, still fighting to keep her alive. The bunker was quiet again, the fire burning low. She held him tightly, whispering promises she never thought she would make. "I'll protect you now. I won't run. I won't let them take you from me." The soldier, barely conscious, let out a faint chuckle. "You're stubborn. And you're reckless," she whispered back, her lips trembling. "But you're mine now. You gave me warmth, and I will never let it go." Outside, the forest lay silent, the hunters gone for now. Inside, in the dim light of the stove, an alien woman and a human soldier leaned on each other, both broken, both scarred, but alive. And for the first time in 10 years, she felt the cold had truly lost. The first light of dawn crept through the cracks in the broken bunker wall, painting the snow outside in pale silver. The woman sat beside the human soldier, his head resting against her shoulder, his face pale from blood loss. She had stayed awake the entire night, pressing cloth against his wounds, whispering words of comfort even when he couldn't hear them. Her body was exhausted, her eyes heavy, but her heart refused to let her sleep. For 10 years she had known only the cold, but now, sitting with him in her arms, she realized warmth was not something given by fire alone. Warmth was trust, sacrifice, and the bond they had created in one desperate night. The soldier stirred weakly, his eyes blinking open. He tried to move, but she pressed him back down gently. "Don't," she whispered, her voice firm but tender. "You need to rest." He looked at her, confusion flickering across his face, as though he wasn't used to someone caring if he lived or died. Slowly, he gave a faint nod and leaned back against her. His hand brushed against hers, not by accident, but as a quiet acknowledgement of everything she had done to keep him alive. Silence filled the bunker, broken only by the soft crackle of the dying stove. The woman's thoughts drifted back to her past. For years, she had begged the stars for one night of warmth. Just one, but last night had given her something more, something she could never have imagined. She closed her eyes, tears slipping down her cheeks, and whispered, "I asked for one night, but now I want forever." The soldier's eyes met hers, his expression serious even through pain. "Forever is dangerous," he said quietly. His voice carried warning, but not rejection. "Your people won't stop. If you stay with me, they'll come again, stronger." Her grip on his hand tightened, and her gaze burned with quiet fire. "Then let them come. I will not run anymore." The words surprised even her. For 10 years, her life had been nothing but running and hiding. But something inside had changed. Watching him fight for her, watching him bleed for her, had awakened strength she thought was long dead. She was tired of being prey. Now, for the first time, she wanted to stand and fight, not just for herself, but for him. Hours passed, and by midday, the forest outside had grown still. The hunters were gone, at least for now. The soldier slowly pushed himself up despite her protests. "We can't stay here," he said, his voice rough but steady. "They'll regroup. We need to move before nightfall." She frowned, worry clouding her face. "You're too weak. If you push yourself, you'll—" "I've survived worse," he interrupted, his eyes narrowing with determination. "But I won't survive sitting here waiting for them to return. Neither will you." She hated that he was right. With a reluctant nod, she helped him to his feet, her arm wrapped tightly around his waist as he leaned against her for support. Step by step, they left the bunker behind, the snow crunching beneath their feet as they moved deeper into the unknown. Their journey was slow, every step a struggle. But they pressed on. The woman glanced at him often, her heart twisting at the sight of his pale face. Yet her spirit burned with pride. He was human, fragile compared to her kind, yet he had carried her through the storm, fought her hunters, and still walked forward despite his wounds. He was weaker in body, but stronger in will than anyone she had ever known. As the sun dipped lower, they reached a ridge overlooking a valley. Below, hidden among the trees, smoke rose from a small village. The sight made her gasp. "Humans?" she asked, hope trembling in her voice. He nodded faintly. "A settlement. Safe enough for now." Together, they made their way down. The villagers, simple people hardened by the cold, looked at them with suspicion as they arrived. But when they saw the soldier's wounds, they hurried to help. They gave him shelter, warmth, and medicine. The woman stayed at his side, refusing to let go of his hand even when they carried him to a bed. That night, as he lay resting, she sat beside him, her heart heavy with emotions she could not put into words. She remembered the first moment she had seen his fire, the first moment she had begged for just one night of warmth. Now she sat in a real bed, holding his hand, watching his chest rise and fall. The stars outside shone bright, and for the first time she did not feel alone beneath them. Days passed, and the soldiers slowly grew stronger. The villagers accepted them cautiously, but soon whispers spread. Stories of a human who fought off alien hunters and of a woman who stood against her own kind. Some called it foolish, others called it brave. But for the woman, none of that mattered. What mattered was that he was alive, and she was no longer just a shadow in the snow. One evening, when the fire in the hearth burned bright, the soldier turned to her. His voice was steady again, his eyes sharp but softer than before. "When you came to me, you asked for one night. That's all you wanted." She looked down, her fingers clutching the blanket, her voice trembling. "Yes, but one night became more than I ever dreamed." She raised her gaze to meet his. "I don't want to survive anymore. I want to live with you." His lips curved into the faintest smile, rare and small but real. He reached out and took her hand, his grip strong and sure. "Then stay, as long as you want. We'll face whatever comes, together." Her heart swelled, tears spilling again, but this time they were not tears of despair. They were tears of joy, of relief, of something she thought she had lost forever. Hope. She leaned forward, resting her forehead against his, whispering, "Forever." Outside, the wind howled, and snow continued to fall. But inside, the bed was warm, the fire bright, and for the first time in 10 long years, the alien woman knew she had finally found her home. Not in walls or blankets, but in the heart of a human who refused to let her face the cold alone.